David and his son Solomon moved God's kingdom on earth forward by establishing Jerusalem as the location of the king and the temple. The Lord's promise to Israelites after the Exodus was to bring them to a place established by God. Exodus 15:17 through 18 says, "You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your inheritance. The place, Lord, you made for your dwelling, the sanctuary, Lord, your hands established. The Lord reigns forever and ever." On the one hand, the establishment of David's throne in Jerusalem was the establishment of the royal family who would represent God's rule on earth. Listen to the way the throne of David's house was described in 1 Chronicles 29:23. Solomon sat on the throne of the Lord as king in place of his father David. The throne of David was the throne of the Lord. The royal house of David led the people of Israel by representing the royal authority of God. At the same time, David prepared and Solomon built a temple for God. The temple, where the Ark of the Covenant, which represented God's presence, sat. But God's purpose in establishing the nation of Israel centered in Jerusalem was not a new purpose. Listen to the way the psalmist expressed this destiny in Psalm 72, 1 through 17. "Endow the king with your justice, O God, the royal son with your righteousness. He will rule from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. All kings will bow down to him, and all nations will serve him. May his name endure forever. May it continue as long as the sun. All nations will be blessed through him, and they will call him blessed." The reign of God's special servant, the King of Israel, would extend the reign of God to all the nations of the earth. Psalm 72 declares that the purpose of the Davidic throne was to fulfill the original purpose for which God had chosen Israel. You will recall that in Genesis 12:3, God had a goal in mind when he called Abraham to himself. It was this: all peoples on earth would be blessed through Abraham. God's original goal in choosing Abraham would finally be fulfilled when the house of David spread God's blessing to all nations. And this is why Psalm 72 ends with resounding praise to God in verse 19. "Praise be to God's glorious name forever. May the whole earth be filled with his glory. Amen and amen." But sadly, the kings of Israel did not always follow the Lord. The kings that follow David are a mixed bag, some good, some bad, some a mixture of both. They serve pagan idols. They no longer act like God's people, inhabiting God's place, living under the rule of God, so his blessings would be withdrawn. God warns the Israelites over and over. He sends prophets to warn them of impending judgment if they do not repent. And around 600 BC, God fulfilled these prophecies. King Nebuchadnezzar invades Israel, besieges Jerusalem, deports much of the Jewish population to Babylon, kills many others, and destroys the temple built under Solomon. Prior to the Babylonian exile, during the exile, and in the years following the return of the Jews to the Promised Land, prophets speak about a new king of Israel, the Messiah. This person would fulfill the promise of God. Look at Jeremiah 31. It tells us that the Messiah would bring a new covenant. Isaiah 7 tells us the Messiah will be born of a virgin. Isaiah 53 tells us the Messiah will bear the people's sins and suffer in their place. Daniel 7 tells us that the Messiah would be the Son of Man, a divine figure. Micah 5 tells us the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. And 2 Samuel 7 tells us that the Messiah will be a descendant of David and rule on his throne forever. These are just a sampling of the promises and prophecies spoke about the coming Messiah in the Old Testament.